Good morning, afternoon, or evening, ladies and gentlemen, all in crypto here, and welcome back, guys, for another jam-packed daily cryptocurrency market update. If you are new around here, every single day at 1 p.m., we release a market update where we don't just look at crypto and things happening internally, but we look further afield. We look at crypto in relation to the macro, to other markets, political kind of atmosphere, so on and so forth. And we try and work out where this small but exceptionally significant and to become infinitely more significant space is heading. So if that sounds good, guys, make sure you do me a favor and smash that subscribe button, click the notification bell. Big shout out to all my regular viewers. If you guys can leave me a like and a comment, it's always appreciated. Today, we have a very interesting update. The SEC really is at the forefront of the cryptocurrency news sphere. And today, we're going to be talking about the major questions doctrine. Now, some of you may have never heard of this. However, this is going to become very applicable in the SEC versus the crypto spaces case. We're going to talk about what it is, why actually this doctrine that is congressional and that requires an agency who is regulating a space without congressional approval to think carefully. And are the SEC in relation to this doctrine overstepping the mark? It's my belief that they are. They can't even answer if Ethereum is a security or not. Well, what place do the Security and Exchange Commission have regulating that? However, we've seen Ethereum get a free pass. We've looked at the hidden documents and all the kind of corruptness involved in that. We'll talk about that a little bit, and then we'll move on to some charts, some macro stuff, and everything in between. But I really want to start off with the major questions doctrine, because this is very interesting, and this is going to become exceptionally applicable in the Binance versus the SEC lawsuit and the Coinbase lawsuit, and arguably has already been applicable to the Ripple lawsuit. One of the reasons the Hinman documents were so zealously tried to be hidden by the SEC was because it shows a pure contradiction. If you're going to say that Ripple is a security or XRP is a security based on largely Brad, Chris, and Ripple selling XRP to fund certain endeavors, well, that also applies to Ethereum that sold 70,000 Ethereum based on Vitalik's kind of advice back in 2017 to quote unquote double their run rate. So the major questions doctrine, I really want to start off with this article from The Block. It was a brilliant article that I think is well worth reading. And actually, this is going to give many of you a lot of hope in regards to this lawsuit. It's absolutely my opinion that the SEC is overstepping their mark. And actually, this may be the kind of legal quota to demonstrate that. And then, of course, we'll get into some sort of macro stuff, some charts, etc., etc. So, former SEC advisor, legal doctrine could end Gensler's crackdown. The major questions doctrine could put an end to its ongoing crackdown led by the SEC and Chairman Gensler. The doctrine challenges the extent of regulatory authorities and requires agencies to obtain explicit authority from Congress for major national economic or political matters. One thing that we've seen in Congress is just how, and actually it was mandated by the Biden administration, crypto blockchain is very important for a country's status as a tech leader. So it's political. It's also economical in terms of jobs. An entire industry is being screwed by this individual. So this, I think, very much qualifies, everything going on very much qualifies to be put up against the major questions doctrine. A former advisor to the US Securities and Exchange Commission is shedding light on a legal doctrine that could challenge the authorities of regulated agencies and could potentially put an end to the SEC Chairman Gensler's crypto crackdown. J.W. Verrett, Associate Professor of Law at George Mason and former advisor committee member to Gensler and the SEC Commissioner, broke down the importance of the major questions doctrine in the latest episode of the Scoop podcast. Hopefully, I'll try and actually reach out to this guy, see if we can get him on. The conversation centered around the recent lawsuits brought by the SEC against Binance and Coinbase over alleged securities laws violations. The major questions doctrine relates to how courts look at what executive agencies do in so-called independent agencies and consider how much defense to give the things that they do. Verret said, these agencies, such as the SEC, receive broad mandates from Congress to regulate certain areas. However, the specifics are often left vague, which has resulted in significant expansion of regulations through agency rulemaking over the years, he added. So, again, this is a power grab, in my opinion, by Gensler and the SEC. I think it's nothing short of market manipulation. It's unfair, but I hate using the word unfair because I'm not one of these people that use unfair as an excuse for anything. I think, life is, unfortunately, unfair, but that's how it goes, Historically, the Chevron Doctrine, a fairly differential approach to agency action in Verret's view, provided a framework for courts to grant agencies broad discretion. However, the Major Questions Doctrine, seen as a competing doctrine, has gained traction amongst conservatives and libertarian-minded judges. Verret suggested. It argues that if an agency seeks to regulate a matter without specific authority from Congress, which the SEC don't have in regards to crypto, especially if it involves national, economic, and political importance, which blockchain 100% does, it first obtains explicit approval from Congress, which they don't have. In fact, Congress has been very harsh in relation to Gensler. Implications for crypto regulations. The Major Questions Doctrine could have significant impacts for the SEC's regulatory actions in the crypto space. Whilst agencies like the SEC derive their authority from broad mandates, the Major Questions Doctrine demands clear congressional authority for major regulatory decisions. It could challenge the SEC's reach and authority in regulating digital assets that operate on decentralized blockchains. Verret said, drawing on examples where regulatory actions went a step beyond what Congress intended. Verret highlighted the Howey test as a good analogy. The test determines whether a financial instrument qualifies as a security. It dates back to the 1946 era, or period, 1946, relating to the Howey company's sales of citrus groves to buyers who would then lease them back the land to Howey. Long before the advance of decentralized crypto networks. How ridiculous is it that we're using a 1946 regulatory framework that was built around Howey's company's sales of citrus groves to regulate decentralized networks? Similarly, the Major Questions Doctrine challenges the SEC's jurisdiction on cryptocurrencies existing solely on decentralized blockchains, where it said, I think it's an argument that Coinbase and Binance are going to run with. The Major Questions Doctrine is not likely to be discussed until the SEC's lawsuits against Coinbase and Binance reach the appellate courts, which could be a long way away. Verret said, but it's one of the things that looms over these cases, without a doubt. Verret ended the interview by saying he would continue to trade on Coinbase, despite the SEC's actions against it. I mostly trade on DeFi now, but Coinbase was part of my early journey, as it was everyone. People have a beef against centralized exchanges. Go look yourself in the mirror and ask yourself how you bought your crypto. They have a role, and actually, I like Coinbase. I certainly think Binance is a good platform, and actually that CZ is a great guy. I really do believe that, genuinely. I am very, very anti-establishment, I wouldn't say all authority, but the kind of authorities that we have at present. So if I thought CZ was I have reasons to be against potentially people in CZ's position. However, I think CZ is an absolutely great guy. I want to just go over to the official Congress website where it talks about the Major Questions Doctrine, and you can see just how applicable this is to the crypto space. We'll then finish off with a little bit of other news, look at a bit of macro stuff, and take a look at the charts. Let's dive into the actual official Major Questions Doctrine. The Major Questions Doctrine, Congress frequently delegates authority to agencies to regulate particular aspects of society in general or broad terms. However, in a number of decisions, the Supreme Court has declared that if an agency seeks to decide an issue of major national significance, like crypto, its actions must be supported by clear congressional authorization, which they don't have. Courts and commentators have referred to this doctrine as the Major Questions Doctrine or Major Rules Doctrine. The Supreme Court could never use, the Supreme Court never used that term in the majority options prior to 2022, but the doctrine has recently become more prominent, certainly going to become infinitely more prominent with everything going on. This in focus provides an overview of the major questions doctrine. It discusses the framework, so on and so forth. Let's take a look at the overview and then we'll move on. Agencies often interpret status that grant them regulatory authority. If challenged, courts may need to review such interpretations to determine if an agency has exceeded its authority, likely what the SEC is doing with crypto. In doing so, courts will sometimes defer to an agency's interpretation of an ambiguous status. The Supreme Court has explained that in general, courts interpret statutory language in its context and with a view to its place in the overall statutory regime. In cases where there is something extraordinary about the history and breadth of the authority, an agency asserts or the economic and political significance of that assertion. However, the court indicates courts should hesitate before concluding that Congress meant to confer such authorities. Under the major questions doctrine, the Supreme Court has rejected agencies' claims of regulatory authority when 1. The underlying claim of authority concerns an issue of vast economic and political significance. You could definitely argue that about crypto. And Congress has not clearly empowered that agency with authority over the issue. Again, both of these points are actually applicable. In requiring agencies to point to clear congressional authorities for their action in major questions cases, the Supreme Court has further explained that Congress rarely provides an extraordinary grant of regulators through language that is modest, vague, subtle, and ambiguous. So this is going to become, and here are some examples of this. Quite a good. I can leave a link to this in the description if you guys want. But I definitely feel like the SEC is massively overstepping their mark here, and this is a power grab. You know, they're trying to go to the courts to get clarity for themselves, other regulatory agencies, and everything in between. It's going to become extremely relevant, this major questions doctrine, and I think it's going to play a big role. Let's move on to a little bit of internal news. How long are we going for now? 12 minutes. And then we'll look at a few charts and we will wrap things up. Again, Ethereum actually came out yesterday and said that they were going to move their Ethereum validator set from 32 Ethereum now to 2048 Ethereum. This is all about shaking out the little guy. We've looked at JP Morgan's involvement with Ethereum. Could they potentially explain why Hinman came out and you know, there's been this kind of other category that's only applicable to Ethereum, but no other layer ones, even though you can argue the layer ones are significantly more decentralized, had better initial sales, so on and so forth. It's just quite interesting. We got Cathie Wood back in the news talking about a $1 million Bitcoin. She's also bought Coinbase. We too believe Coinbase is a good stock at these prices. We weren't buying it when she was buying it at 200. You know, this is their average entry. She has been so wrecked. We avoided a lot of that. We still have a lot of macroeconomic uncertainties, but we ultimately think that we've got the macro absolutely spot on. Since we took a position long on the markets, the only markets that have given us a bit of jip is the altcoin markets, which are now at sort of January's lows. Most other markets, whether it be the stock market, whether it be gold, whether it be the dollar coming down, have very much played ball, barring the crypto space. But we still expect the macro to be right in regards to suggesting upside. We do believe, and people get rather confused with this because they probably only focus on the crypto space, that Bitcoin is now in a bull market. We think there's been a fundamental shift with the markets, something that we were looking at going into 2023. We took that punt. Ultimately, we do think that Bitcoin and the total cryptocurrency market is out of a bear. Altcoins have gone and put in a new low, so you cannot say they're out of a bear. But if we just look at the chart upside down, anybody that's familiar with Dow theory, you know, this kind of gets more and more fulfilled in regards to Bitcoin and the direction that we think it's now going. So this is an inverted chart. Up is down, down is up, just to confuse everyone. This is essentially, we ended this on FTX, one of the largest players capitulating out the market. If you look at these marginally lower lows, right, this is how this ended. We've got a million and one reasons, but this is just something that I've been looking at recently that I find rather interesting. Markets move in ebb and flows. And ultimately, we think that this is now the start of something much broader. We think we've got the macro right. We think Bitcoin's playing ball. Generally, the total market cap is. Altcoins, not so much because they're small altcoins that have been hit with an SEC lawsuit. But there's a yin and a yang to that. Stock market doing well, so on and so forth. The macro we think is very much in our favor. We think you're going to have a blow off essentially maybe for the stock market. New all-time highs coming for the stock market. What do you think crypto is going to do under that? And we've showed you all the reasons for it. We've looked at rates, so on and so forth. Very interesting that you've got these marginally higher highs and marginally low lows are typically a bearish sign on a bigger term time frame. You had your divergences here, just like you had your divergences here. Which likely won't show up on the 3 day. Well, they will, but not as we want them to. You've gone from divergence to divergence. You can't really, I don't really think you can trade divergences, by the way. But what I do think you can certainly do is use them to look at a trend more broadly. You know, ultimately we think this is coming down, which means it's going up, just to uninvert the scale. So we still remain very positive on the crypto space despite everything. We think the SEC is doing a horrific job of protecting consumers and investors, but that's the US bureaucracy for you, I guess. On that note, I'm going to love and leave you. Let me know what you think about the major questions doctrine. Take a read of the article below. And also what you think about the markets. I want to know your thoughts. We are going to love and leave you on that note. If you've enjoyed the content, as always, like is appreciated, so is a comment. And I'll catch you all in the next one. Thanks all for watching. See you in the next.